Hello, my name's Dave Emory, and this is Side 1 of For the Record program number 732, titled Dead Man's Chest, WikiFascism and the Attack of the Cyber-Wandervogel. This program is being recorded on January 9th of the year 2011. Well, first of all, Happy New Year. This is the first broadcast being recorded in 2011. And let me begin this program by encouraging people who are not doing it to use the SpitfireList.com website. In particular, there are a number of anti-fascist books, many of them quite old, for download for free. This is one of those broadcasts that probably isn't going to make a whole lot of sense to people who are not using the website, and in particular, fundamental to understanding the For the Record broadcasts, including and especially this one, will be a hands-on understanding of the book Martin Bormann, Nazi in Exile by Paul Manning, a protege of Edward R. Murrow and one of Murrow's boys that worked for CBS covering World War II in Europe. Edward R. Murrow broadcast the surrender of Japan and Germany on a CBS radio network, and then with the underwriting of CBS News that wouldn't touch the story, and with the encouragement of Edward R. Murrow, who encouraged him to follow the story, Paul Manning wrote the story of the post-war underground Reich, literally an underground Reich grouped around and derivative from a capital network, a powerful economic network that was inextricably linked with corporate Germany and the international cartels, and that grew out of the Third Reich as it went underground in the post-war period. That book, Martin Bormann, Nazi in Exile by Paul Manning, available for download for free. And this broadcast will be one of those programs for which an understanding of that book will be essential to really grasp this broadcast. Now, this program is going to be yet another in a number of programs, a sequence of broadcasts dealing with WikiLeaks. That is sort of an international, actually it's a bit of a conundrum at this point. It is an organization of hackers and international computer folks who they portray themselves as a whistleblower site, but that's really not what they're doing. What they're doing is not so much flagging wrongdoing, for example, publishing the Social Security numbers of active duty American military personnel. That's not whistleblowing. And a lot of what they're doing really is not so much whistleblowing. They're not calling attention to wrongdoing. In some cases, yes, but in an awful lot of cases they're not, and in many cases they're actually doing wrongdoing. One of the interesting things about WikiLeaks, and I would stress that I have many, many, many questions about this. In a lot of ways it doesn't make sense. But some of the things that I will say without qualification. First of all, WikiLeaks is Spook City. This is sort of like a WWF cage match for intelligence services. There are a bunch of different intelligence services involved with this. There are indications that the Australian intelligence service, through the family cult of Anne Hamilton Byrne, with which Assange appears to be connected, his disclaimers to the contrary notwithstanding. They have links to Australian intelligence, and through that probably the British intelligence milieu and the Echelon Network. The Wow Holland Foundation, which was handling some donations for WikiLeaks. They have links to the BND. There is a lot of discussion in WikiLeaks emails that were leaked by John Young of Cryptome.org. One of WikiLeaks' original founders who broke with WikiLeaks when he took serious issue with a lot of the things they're doing. And he noted basically they're behaving like a bunch of spies. They're behaving like a government. They're acting like a cult. And indeed they are. Julian Assange's emails, he boasts of getting information from various CIA subsidiary organizations. He also boasts or states that one of the things they're going to do is get funding from intelligence services, including CIA, in order to ultimately fleece them or bring them down. That, by the way, is an example of what the Greeks referred to as hubris. I think if I were a compulsively or ideologically transgressive computer type, I don't think I would be going around looking to secure funding from intelligence services in order to double up on the intelligence services. Not a good idea. That is, if he can be taken at face value. And as we took a look at some of the emails in For the Record program number 724 and in 725, and the fact of the matter is, that Assange is somebody who is quite overt about being dishonest. And indeed, in an earlier professional incarnation, he referred to himself, he adopted the professional name of Mendax. It's a reference to classical literature and translates roughly as liar. And he's quite overt about engaging in various forms of deception. So whenever one is examining a statement by Assange, one should factor that in. Also, the fact that the family cult practices a very rigorous form of mind control, and if indeed he's connected to it, and I think the evidence points in that direction, then he may not know everything about himself. In WikiLeaks, however, there are some things that can be said for sure. First of all, at the epicenter of this vortex, I'm going to call it, is a Swedish Nazi financier named Carl Lundström. The available evidence suggests that he is part of that Bormann network that I alluded to earlier. He is a prominent underwriter of Swedish fascist parties. He also, interestingly enough, has offered here, he provided a file-sharing site called Pirate Bay, which uses a BitTorrent protocol. And by the way, I'm not overly familiar with these things, to put it mildly, but it's a file-sharing site that users use to download music, DVDs, and so forth. And Pirate Bay and the people that use it are about as far from ideological fascism as anybody could get. And that is one of the points that I want to stress very strongly. I do not want to be misunderstood as characterizing the users of Pirate Bay or the elements that are involved with the Pirate Bay, the Pirate Party, and the pirate milieu, so to speak, as fascist. On the contrary, my guess is that most of the young people involved with using the Pirate Bay and most of the young people involved with the associated and derivative pirate parties that exist in a number of different countries, they might be described politically as a sort of anarcho-utopian, to coin a term. It is not a type of political philosophy at all uncommon, particularly to young people, who see a very, very, very brutally imperfect world in front of them and conclude that if only these barriers and these impediments to free expression and free action could just be somehow lifted or dissolved, then everything would sort itself out. We'd all find ourselves living in a golden age, in a utopian time. It sure would be nice, but doesn't work that way. It's one of the reasons why many tribal societies and Aboriginal peoples, they have the Council of Elders. They talk to the people that have been around a while, have had a chance to live and sort of see how things are going, and they draw their opinions. Because at the epicenter of this vortex, the anonymous milieu, we'll talk more about that, the Pirate Party, the file sharers of Pirate Bay, at the epicenter of this is a hardcore Nazi financier, and the available evidence suggests he's part of the Bormann network. So the question suggests itself, what motivation would Carl Lundström have for helping to underwrite the expenses of Pirate Bay and providing them with servers and bandwidth? By the way, Carl Lundström was head of Rickström, which was a Swedish telecom company, and he, according to one of the articles that we've seen, he underwrote roughly 40% of the expenses of Pirate Bay. We're going to talk about the motivations, possible motivations for doing that as we get into the broadcast. But one of the things to think about is the fact that according to tech-savvy sources that I've spoken to, with the arrangement of Pirate Bay and PRQ and Rickström offering WikiLeaks their servers and bandwidth for operational purposes, this would permit people with the proper knowledge and technology associated with Carl Lundström, basically, to download and monitor. It would basically enable them to access everything that was going into WikiLeaks. And most of the information communicated to them appears to have come to them over the Internet. They've had documents and all kinds of things. We're going to take a look at that as we get into the broadcast. But the actual amount of information that has been leaked to WikiLeaks is truly astounding. There's an amazing amount of information that has made its way to them, and exactly how much of this has been accessed by the Nazi International as anybody's guess, but according to my tech sources, in fact, by providing them with their servers and their bandwidth, this would permit the Nazi International, the Underground Reich, as I call it, to access all of the information being sent to WikiLeaks. And what is this? This is from one of the emails that John Young, one of WikiLeaks' original founders, leaked after he broke with the organization. And here is one of the emails this is from January 7th of 2007 from John Young, or to John Young from Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. We're going to F blank 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 them all. Chinese mostly, but not entirely a feint. Invention abounds. Lies, twists, distorts everywhere needed for protection. Hackers monitor Chinese and other intel as they burrow into their targets, and when they pull, so do we. Now this is what by hosting WikiLeaks, this is what the Nazi International and Lundstrom's associates would have access to. And continuing with this email to John Young, inexhaustible supply of material, near 100,000 documents, emails a day. We're going to crack the world open and let it flower into something new. If fleecing the CIA will assist us, then fleece we will. We have pullbacks from NED, that's the National Endowment for Democracy, CFR, Council on Foreign Relations, Freedom House, and other CIA teats. We have all the pre-2005 Afghanistan, almost all of India fed, half a dozen foreign ministries, dozens of political parties and consulates, World Bank, APEC, UN sections, trade groups, Tibet and Fulon Dafa associations, and Russian fishing mafia who pull data everywhere. We're drowning. We don't even know a tenth of what we have or who it belongs to. We stopped storing it at what I believe is 1 trilobite. Anyway, it's just some huge amount. The point is that, among other things, what WikiLeaks and through its association with Pirate Bay is essentially, in effect, an enormous data mining information for the Nazi International. That, I think, can be discerned as one of the motivations for Carl Lundstrom to do this. But there also appears to be a couple of other motivations as well. We're going to get into the Pirate Bay and the maneuvering around Pirate Bay, and this is going to dovetail with some of the discussions that we engaged in the late 90s and early part of the last decade, dealing with German corporate control over the American media and world media in general. We're going to take a look at the torrent bit protocol, which is at the core of Pirate Bay, that technology, because apparently it is being seen as potentially very lucrative for the future of online music sharing. Also a thought to consider before we actually get into Pirate Bay and the Cyber-Wandervogel, as I call them. When Albert Einstein contemplated the advent of nuclear weapons, he made an observation that, quote, everything has changed but our way of thinking, unquote. I think that is not only true, but among the technologies that have made that even more true are computers, as wonderful as they are, and I'm a fan of the Internet. It enables me to broadcast far more and much farther than I ever could before. The fact of the matter is that computer technology is something that can permit a relatively small or even a very small number of people to impose their will on a very large number of people. That certainly would be appealing to any doctrinaire fascist, or, extending that, any doctrinaire totalitarian. Certainly any form of totalitarian socialism, Stalinism and Maoism, for example, would relish such an event or an advent, and an absolute monarch would want to do the same thing. Anyone who wants to impose their will on others can see technology, and in particular computer technology, as one of the means of doing so. And I want to cite something of an historical analogy, and that is between the hackers such as the Anonymous and 4chan group. Again, the people grouped around Pirate Bay, the Pirate Party, Anonymous, 4chan, and I want to stress again, very emphatically, because I'm not going to have time to keep making this point every time I bring up the association, that not only am I not implying that these people are Nazis or fascists. On the contrary, they would be the last people in the world who would consider themselves in that context. They might be characterized politically as anarcho-utopian. Nonetheless, there is an analogy, and we're going to go back in time. We're actually going to go back into the archives to For the Record program 629, It's Not Easy Being Green, Part 2, dealing with eco-fascism. And we're going to deal with the Wandervogel. Now, what the Wandervogel were, and we're going to quote here from the book Eco-Fascism, Lessons from the German Experience by Janet Biel and Peter Staudenmeier. The Wandervogel were some idealistic youth in early 20th century Germany who in many ways anticipated some of the philosophical ideals of the hippie movement, of the green movement, and of certain aspects of youth culture. Indeed, they're characterized here as right-wing hippies. They were into natural foods, homeopathy, among other things, save the whales, a very strong back to the land and ecological consciousness, and they were idealistic. Most of them ultimately became Nazis, and I think I'd like to invite very carefully, very emphatically, those people involved with Anonymous, Pirate Bay Party, etc., to consider very carefully the example of the Wandervogel and to pay very close attention to what it is you're actually dealing with. I'm going to suggest that the Anonymous milieu, the Pirate Bay, the Pirate Party vortex, that revolves around Pirate Bay, at the epicenter of which is Nazi Karl Lundstrom, I'm going to suggest that, in effect, they are like the Cyber-Wandervogel, and their recent attacks on companies such as PayPal and Amazon could be seen as something of an attack of the Cyber-Wandervogel. Going back to For the Record 629 and Eco-Fascism of Wandervogel, quote, "The chief vehicle for carrying this ideological constellation to prominence was the youth movement, an amorphous phenomenon, I would say, like Anonymous, Pirate Bay, Pirate Party, etc. The chief vehicle for carrying this ideological constellation to prominence was the youth movement, an amorphous phenomenon which played a decisive but highly ambivalent role in shaping German popular culture during the first 3 tumultuous decades of the century. Also known as the Wandervogel, which translates roughly as wandering free spirits, or I would say literally wandering birds, the youth movement was a hodgepodge of countercultural elements blending neo-romanticism, Eastern philosophies, nature mysticism, hostility to reason, and a strong communal impulse in a confused but no less ardent search for authentic, non-alienated social relations. Their back-to-the-land emphasis spurred a passionate sensitivity to the natural world and the damage it suffered. They have been accurately characterized as right-wing hippies, for although some sectors of the movement gravitated toward various forms of emancipatory politics, though usually shedding their environmental trappings in the process, most of the Wandervogel were eventually absorbed by the Nazis. This shift from nature worship to Führer worship is worth examining," unquote. And again, I'm going to posit the simile of the Anonymous / Pirate Party / Pirate Bay Operation Payback milieu. Again, young people who would be described as anarcho-utopian, the farthest thing from people who would consider themselves fascists. I would suggest that in many ways they could be seen as sort of Cyber-Wandervogel, and they should exercise due diligence lest they be similarly deceived. Now, one of the points that I want to make here, and we're going to get back to the political nature of Karl Lundstrom. I've talked about Karl Lundstrom in For the Record 707. He's also discussed in For the Record 725. But one of the points that I want to make as we discuss WikiLeaks, and again, bear in mind that according to my sources, my tech sources, the arrangement of Rickstrom / PRQ server offering WikiLeaks, that's Karl Lundstrom basically offering WikiLeaks, their bandwidth and servers would permit them basically to access anything that WikiLeaks was getting through that portal. I may be misusing that term. One of the things to consider is the extent to which WikiLeaks operations are inextricably linked with, I'll call it the pirate vortex. I mean, not just Pirate Bay per se, the file-sharing website, but also, as we talked about in For the Record 725, there is an international political party called the Pirate Party with branches in Sweden, Switzerland, Germany, and other places. And that group in turn overlaps the group Anonymous and 4chan as well. And as we're going to see, everywhere one looks with WikiLeaks, one finds this pirate vortex. And despite the fact that many of the people, and probably most of the people involved with that, the overwhelming majority of the people involved with that, would not consider themselves Nazi or fascist in any way, at the epicenter is the Nazi spider Carl Lundstrom. And we should consider the extent to which WikiLeaks is inextricably linked with the pirate vortex, so to speak. Of course, WikiLeaks now has mirrored servers all over the place, and all sorts of left-of-center luminaries from Michael Moore to others are lining up behind WikiLeaks. But nonetheless, the pirate vortex, as I call it, is inextricably linked with WikiLeaks, and it's why I'm taking the time to go into Lundstrom and his affiliations. Of the association between Lundstrom and PRQ, the following is from an AP story from MSNBC.com. A Swedish internet, it's called Swedish web hosting firm confirms WikiLeaks link. A Swedish internet company linked to the file-sharing hub The Pirate Bay says it's helping online whistleblower WikiLeaks release classified documents from servers located in a Stockholm suburb. Michael Viborg, the owner of the web hosting company PRQ, on Friday showed the Associated Press the site, the basement of a drab office building in Solna, on the condition that the exact location was not revealed. This is the office. The server room is further inside, unquote, the 28-year-old Viborg said, with the door to the office cracked open. Desks with computers, documents, and empty pastry boxes and soda cans could be seen inside before he closed the door. WikiLeaks posted more than 76,000 classified military and other documents, mostly raw intelligence reports from Afghanistan, on its website July 25th. The White House angrily denounced the leaks, and saying that they put the lives of Afghan informants and U.S. troops at risk. The secretive website gives few details about its setup, but says its servers are distributed over multiple international jurisdictions and do not keep logs. Hence, these logs cannot be seized. One of the things to note here is the fact that the milieu around Pirate Bay, they're very much like the Napster folks. They're into file sharing, and I guess I would assume that the pirate term for Pirate Bay alludes to the fact that they're illegally downloading a lot of stuff. But these are people who basically want to download music and DVDs and so forth. The last people in the world who would consider themselves fascist, and they also consider themselves to be very, very anti-corporate, which is really very ironic. Not only do they have Carl Lundstrom sort of sitting at the epicenter of this spider's web, but ultimately Pirate Bay was sold to a Swedish gaming firm called the Global Gaming Factory. And we're going to talk about that, although as we're going to see, this company appears to be in trouble, and it remains to be seen just exactly where Pirate Bay goes. But the point is that these breakers of corporate and commercial bonds, talking about the founders of Pirate Bay, those who would liberate the users of that from corporate constraints, they're looking to find somebody to buy this for a profit. And it would appear, as we're going to get into this, it would appear that one of the motivations is in order to use the BitTorrent protocol for profit, basically, to use it the way Napster ultimately was used. Napster was kind of a downloading pirate site. Ultimately, it was absorbed first by Bertelsmann, then it went to somebody else, and it became quite lucrative, according to report. But the anti-corporate folks in the pirate vortex probably don't realize just exactly what's happening with Pirate Bay. It is becoming very, very corporate, and beyond that, very, very interesting indeed. From BBC News, Pirate Bay site sold to game firm. This from June 30th of 2009. The previous story, by the way, August 6th of 2010. The lucrative Global Gaming Factory, or GGF, has paid 60 million kroner, or 4.7 million euro or pounds, to take over the site from its founders. Once it has taken control, Global Gaming Factory said it would start paying copyright fees for the movies, music, and games linked to via the site. It ultimately turned out, as we're going to see, that GGF may be facing bankruptcy. They were going to pay for the acquisition of Pirate Bay with stock. The day before the sale was announced, there was a 170% run-up in their stock, which smacks very strongly of exactly the sort of dirty insider trading that characterized the very kinds of corporate operations that the Pirate Bay, Pirate Party, Anonymous, 4chan people would be completely opposed to. And as we're going to see, it gets even worse than that. Again, one might ask, how would you have a fascist money man like Carl Lundstrom involved with something like this? The following story is from The Guardian, and it's an article by Andrew Brown called "The Pirate Bay Trial is the Collision of Can I and Should I Cultures," and there's some very interesting observations here. Then moneyman Carl Lundstrom, on whose servers the Pirate Bay and WikiLeaks was housed, is straight out of the crime novels of Stieg Larsson. He inherited a fortune built on crisp bread and has a long history of involvement with extreme right-wing politics. In the 1980s, he was a member of Keep Sweden Swedish, an anti-immigrant fringe group. He has financially backed the Sweden Democrats, a would-be populist and anti-immigrant party, and only this month, the managing director of one of his companies was charged with a robbery in a small West Coast town, part of a feud within a neo-Nazi group. Lundstrom told the Metro newspaper after he sacked the man he had known he was a party member, but not that he had known that he was a party member, but not that he had gone to collect another member's computer with a submachine gun. That sentence again, because I botched it, excuse me. Lundstrom told the Metro newspaper after he sacked the man that he had known that he was a Nazi Party member, but not that he had gone to collect another member's computer with a submachine gun. Gottfried Svartholm Varg and Fredrik Neij, the nerds who run the Pirate Bay itself, have also been accused by the prosecutor of tax evasion, but deny that they were making any money from their business. Their attitude of sneering entitlement towards the government is all of a piece with their attitude towards the big content companies. I know that a little bit of the rhetoric around the Pirate Bay sounds left-wing, the idea that it's wrong for international capital, unquote, to push Sweden around, but that's just populist and could be found in the rhetoric of the kind of parties that Carl Lundstrom has supported too. The overwhelming impression is of a clash between two right-wing views. One says that it is all right to steal from the state, and one which says it is sinful to steal from corporations. Again, the early Nazi Party, the notion was that Germany was being pushed around by these the international bankers and so forth, and the Pirate Bay folks are mad that international capital is pushing Sweden around. This is quasi-fascist rhetoric. So again, ultimately recruiting some of the Pirate Bay people as Wandervogel and ultimately Nazis may be another motivation for someone like Carl Lundstrom to get involved here. Now, as I mentioned, one of the motivations may also be that the BitTorrent protocol of Pirate Bay could prove very, very, very useful for the corporate control of the music business. Now, again, in a long for the record series called German Corporate Control over American Media, I talked about Bertelsmann, its forays into various forms of American media, and we're going to examine this, and we're also going to examine this against the background of For the Record 695, the death of Michael Jackson. And I can appreciate that a lot of people are out there saying, oh boy, Dave has really lost it. Now, what is this? Pirate Bay, WikiLeaks, Michael Jackson, Nazis? Boy. Well, I hope I've whetted your interest, because that's all we have time for in Side 1. We're going to plunge right back in due to the limitations of time where we left off on Side 1. We've been talking about, this is a very tall glass to drink at one sitting, but even by For the Record standards. But we've been talking about WikiLeaks, its relationship, what I call the pirate vortex, not only the pirate downloading, the pirate file-sharing site, the file-sharing site Pirate Bay, but the associated international political parties, the pirate parties, and also the international associated online hacker/computer milieu, Anonymous. These are all overlapping and associated. We've been taking a look at that, and the Nazi or Fascist International, as I call it, one of its financial luminaries, a guy named Carl Lundstrom operating out of Sweden, and we're going to plunge right back into the discussion. Now, when we left off at side one, we were talking about the possible motivations for somebody like Carl Lundstrom to get involved with a milieu that's basically a sort of anarcho-utopian, file-sharing, anti-corporate, let's break all the bonds and the freedom will flower all over the world kind of thing. And again, I'm not being as cynical as it probably is, as sarcastic as that sounds, but why would you have somebody like Carl Lundstrom involved with a milieu like that? Well, that's one of the questions I'm asking. We've already taken a look at the fact that it would permit the Nazi International, and probably has permitted them, to access all of the information sent to WikiLeaks, and that would be tremendously useful for them. Also, the BitTorrent protocol would be very useful for online sharing of music. And in the aforementioned For the Record series, German Corporate Control of American Media, we took a look at Bertelsmann and its forays into publishing and music. And in For the Record program number 695, Dancing Machine, we took a look at Michael Jackson and his death, and we examined some indications of foul play and some indications of some real foul elements around Michael Jackson, and also the fact that one of the things that made his demise potentially very lucrative was the fact that he owned an awful lot of the rights to Beatles music. Right at the time of Michael Jackson's death, Bertelsmann, which had sashayed out of the music business for a while, sashayed right back in, being bankrolled by Kohlberg Kravis Roberts to engage in music licensing. And one of the lines of speculation was that they were going to go for the Beatles songs, that the rights to which were jointly owned by Sony and the, at that point, late Michael Jackson. Just so happens that the two big stories in the music business that week were the death of Michael Jackson and, ta-da, the purchase of Pirate Bay by GGF, okay? And when I'm asking, with Bertelsmann looming large in the one situation and with Carl Lundstrom in the other, whether this was part of the same Serpent's Walk, Underground Reich gaining of corporate control over various media. Noting the following, there have been two big music business news stories in the past week. One has been and still is dominating all media outlets, and the other pretty much snuck in under the radar. The biggest story, of course, was the death of Michael Jackson and the resulting cancellation of his 50 gigs at the O2. And the other was the report there are reports that subscribers are closing their accounts, and a global gaming factory is facing an insider trading investigation after its stock saw a huge upswing in trades on Monday, the day before the deal was announced. So the two big stories in the media business that week, and by the way, this is from The Guardian of July 3rd of 2009, behind the music, Pirate Bay's purchase proves they're not altruistic. And again, the purchase of Pirate Bay by Global Gaming Factory was going to be done in considerable measure with GGF stock. There was a huge run-up in that, 170% increase in their stock the day before the deal was announced. They now are apparently facing bankruptcy, so it remains to be seen exactly who will wind up with Pirate Bay, but again, or with the technology of Pirate Bay. But again, note the corporate maneuvering over this, and even more, again, note how the realities of Pirate Bay are not only fundamentally different from the sort of anarcho-utopian ideals of the people who use it and the people in the Pirate Bay Pirate Party anonymous milieu, but even beyond that, it turns out that although people like Carl Lundstrom have underwritten the operations of Pirate Bay, that actually the owner is a shell holding company that was incorporated in the Seychelles Islands, which brings us right back to the murky world of offshore corporations that we've looked at in our conversations with Lucy Commissar, and also the sort of corporate fronts that various corporations use for malfeasance, from Enron to the various fronts put up by the Borman Capital Network. Let's take a look at what really lies behind Pirate Bay. And the following, by the way, the full URL for this will be in the description for the Record 732. This is from online. This is from Project Archive, October 28th, 2009. fresh Pirate Bay purchase attempt by 4 potential buyers. Now listen who actually controls Pirate Bay. Earlier this year, the shareholders of Global Gaming Factory agreed to acquire the world's largest BitTorrent tracker. All the company had to do was to come up with $7.8 million, or SEK 60 million, half of which to be paid in shares. As anonymous investors pulled out and promises from the shareholders that they would come up with the funds themselves came up to nothing, the deadline for the sale passed and the site stayed in the hands of Reservela, the Seychelles-based holding company that acquired the Pirate Bay 2 years ago. But for those missing the optimistic press releases, bold statements, and dramas of the attempted purchase by GGF today brings good news. According to a report, Reservela, with a helping hand from ex-Pirate Bay spokesman Peter Sunday, are in fresh talks with 4 potential buyers. So a couple of years ago, Pirate Bay was nominally sold to a holding company incorporated in the Seychelles Islands, probably to prevent it from being seized or utilized. So once we begin digging into Pirate Bay, we're right back with, again, the world of murky offshore corporate fronts, Enron, the Borman Network, the exact antithesis of the very types of things that the Pirate Bay users, the Pirate Party anonymous folks think they're getting involved with. Hence, my use of the comparison with the Wandervogel. And as we take a look at Carl Lundstrom, it begins to become even clearer just exactly where he's at. One of the things that Carl Lundstrom was suggesting, and this may have been one of the things that prompted the sale of Pirate Bay to a Seychelles Islands Incorporated holding company, and one of the things, according to a report, what Carl Lundstrom was suggesting to the other Pirate Bay owners was that they move the operation to Argentina. Well, that, I think, to knowledgeable listeners, veteran listeners, that pretty much speaks for itself. From the GIGAOM, the full reference will be, this is a Scandinavian publication, from Janko Rutgers, who is the 4th man in the Pirate Bay case. Actually, it might come from the Netherlands, from February 2nd of 2008. The paper also talks about knowledge on Lundstrom's side about potential legal ramifications. Again, maybe that's what prompted the sale to the holding company incorporated in the Seychelles. Prosecutors say Lundstrom personally sent an SMS to Frederick Nage on May 31st of 2006 to warn him about the raids against the Pirate Bay and its owners. Lundstrom supposedly also suggested in an email to move the Pirate Bay's operations to Argentina. Well, that obviously is one of the major epicenters of the Nazi diaspora, post-war diaspora, both personnel and capital. And again, exactly who it is. Pirate Bay sold a Swedish IT company from the Swedish Wire. It's still unclear who actually are the owners of the Pirate Bay. There's no company with the name Pirate Bay registered in Sweden. According to GGF's legal advisor, Per-Erik Alvsing, the Pirate Bay is owned by a company in the Seychelles called Reservela, Dagens Industri Rights. But he doesn't know who's the owner of Reservela. Again, it sounds just like the corporate fronts we've examined with Lucy Commissar. Think Enron, think Borman Network. So at the epicenter of the anarcho-utopian Pirate Bay, Pirate Party milieu is something very, very different. Corporatist indeed. We're going to take a look, too, at a Swedish blog here, and I'm going to do the best I can with the publications. But we're going to take a look at some more of Carl Lundstrom's political sympathies, and then we're going to come back to this. Lundstrom has made no secret of his sympathy for the xenophobic groups, and last year his name was linked with the customer code of the Nazi publishing house Nordic Publishers. Basically, he was one of the customers of a Nazi publishing house, Nordic Publishers. Lundstrom replied, "I support them by buying books and music. You in the media just want to spread contempt for different people. You in the media are full of hatred for the Pirate Bay," concludes a very upset Carl Lundstrom. And it goes on to continue. Nordic Publishing Company sells white power music and books that celebrate racist violence. That publisher supports the Nazi demonstration in Salem and invited the Ku Klux Klan leader for a lecture tour in Sweden. That Ku Klux Klan leader is David Duke. But we're going to come back to this in just a second. Remember the name Nordiska Forlaget, or Nordic Publishers. We're going to come back to that in just a second. But I want to take a note again of just how deeply involved the pirate nexus or the pirate vortex. Again, Pirate Bay, the associated international pirate parties, Anonymous, 4chan, etc., are with the operations of WikiLeaks. And again, we took a look at the fact that Pirate Bay helped to provide WikiLeaks with their operations in Sweden. The Pirate Party has also assisted their actual physical plant in Sweden by helping to give them with helping to provide them with a former underground nuclear shelter for an operating center. By the way, one of the articles about this particular underground nuclear bunker noted that a lot of people have looked at Julian Assange and have thought maybe he would have been appropriate as a science fiction character, like somebody from a 50s sci-fi movie, or maybe the old Outer Limits TV series, or perhaps he would have made a very good James Bond villain. They were noting this particular underground nuclear bunker. It really does have a distinctly Bondish atmosphere to it, even down to the point where the power plant for this underground nuclear bunker, where WikiLeaks operations are housed now in part, is provided by a couple of diesel engines from a World War II German U-boat. And it is, as some wags had noted, it really is very Bondish. I guess I want to say Bondish and discipline under the circumstances. But again, want to note the extent to which the pirate vortex is involved with WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks now hosted from an underground nuclear bunker by Martin Bryant and thenextweb.com from August 30th of this year. One of the world's most controversial websites now has one of the world's coolest data centers. Andy Greenberg at Forbes has picked up a Norwegian report that WikiLeaks servers are now hosted in Sweden's Pionen data center, housed inside a Cold War-era underground nuclear bunker 30 meters below Stockholm. It reportedly has a single entrance with a half-meter-thick metal doors. The move has been initiated by the Swedish Pirate Party, who began looking after WikiLeaks hosting this month. And it goes on to have some statements. It says here, we have long admired WikiLeaks, the Pirate Party's Rick Falkvina told Norway's VG, claiming that as his party is hosting WikiLeaks, an attack on WikiLeaks is also regarded as an attack on a political party. Then, after WikiLeaks was subjected to some denial of service attacks, the Swiss Pirate Party undertook to access some of WikiLeaks material. The following is from the Vancouver Sun. On Friday, the Pirate Party of Switzerland, part of an international movement fighting for the free sharing of online content, said it owned the wikileaks.ch domain name and was happy to support WikiLeaks. I don't see an opportunity for a foreign government to reach into Switzerland, said Leinars. This is a very forward-looking move. And beyond that, when their various funding conduits began to dry up, one of the founders of Pirate Bay, Peter Sunday, basically had a startup company that was used as a conduit for funds for WikiLeaks. So one of the people who founds Pirate Bay has a startup company that is being used as a financial conduit for WikiLeaks when things like PayPal, MasterCard, and others have begun going south. And the following is from WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks still funded by Pirate Bay founder startup, from Web Newser by Kenneth Musanti, December 9th of 2010. While major online financing services such as PayPal, MasterCard, and Visa have shut down their dealings with the embattled WikiLeaks, one microfinancing startup is still hanging on. Flatter, a micropayment startup created by Peter Sunday, co-founder of the infamous BitTorrent sharing site The Pirate Bay, still accepts donations on behalf of the document-leaking nonprofit. Sunday has been a public advocate for Assange and WikiLeaks. He has also proposed a peer-to-peer DNS system that would prevent domain name registrations from being revoked, as was done with the wikileaks.org domain. And again, after this began to happen, there were a number of denial of service attacks and others on some of the various companies, such as PayPal and others, that had stopped channeling funds for WikiLeaks. After this, there was a campaign, basically, it's a denial of service and hacking campaign against many of these companies that was conducted by the anonymous milieu. Now, again, Anonymous and the 4chan group are they're anonymous, of course. They're loosely affiliated with Pirate Bay, and I'll have some links in the description for the program documenting that. The logo for Operation Payback is obviously very closely derivative from the Pirate Bay logo, which has what appears to be a tape cassette on the sails of a traditional old, maybe 17th or 18th century pirate ship. And Operation Payback has the same thing, except that they're firing a gun. And Operation Payback, Anonymous, the Pirate Party / Pirate Bay milieu are, if not coterminous, certainly very heavily overlapped. And again, that's why I refer to the whole Pirate Bay situation as a vortex, at the epicenter of which is Carl Lundstrom of Operation Payback, done by the same pirate milieu or pirate vortex. The hacker-friendly website 4chan has begun to organize its members, known collectively as Anonymous, in an effort to prevent the oppressive future, quote, the oppressive future which looms ahead, unquote. The Operation Avenge Assange will consist of a series of internet attacks that have begun with PayPal. And then it goes to talk about Julian Assange and who he is. One of the more potentially powerful groups to throw in its support for Assange is the website 4chan and some of its members that are collectively known as Anonymous. The group that is either famous or infamous, depending on your point of view, have begun a new campaign to support WikiLeaks and its creator that they are calling Operation Avenge Assange. Operation Avenge Assange is a systematic attack that will target groups that Anonymous has deemed to be essentially treated to have essentially treated Assange unfairly. The first target on the list is PayPal, which reports that cyber attacks have already begun. So the point that I'm making here is that that WikiLeaks operations, from the original servers and bandwidth provided by Rickstrom and PRQ, down to their various physical hosting situations, down to the group that's avenging their attacks, they are inextricably linked with the pirate vortex. One of Peter Sunday's Pirate Bay funders' startups is handling their financing. One cannot really separate this pirate vortex from WikiLeaks. But also note very quickly, and there's going to be at least one more show about WikiLeaks. Certainly no one familiar with this program could possibly come away from it not realizing that there's no love lost between yours truly and big corporations. However, the fact of the matter is, if you're doing a business operation, large or small, and if there are indications that somebody with whom you are potentially doing business or have been are doing something wrong, you should have the right to not do business with them. Aside from anything having to do with the U.S. government, the fact of the matter is there are very serious questions about WikiLeaks finances, and those come not from the U.S. government, but from people like the Wow Holland Foundation in Germany, which was helping to channel foundations to WikiLeaks, and they were noting some serious anomalies vis-a-vis WikiLeaks finances. So was John Young. That's one of the reasons he quit the group. He said flat out that their insistence on getting lots of money doesn't make sense and is not necessary. So there's some very legitimate questions about their finances, but again noting that fascism would be the last thing from the minds of the pirate/anonymous people. Yet when you are using technology, it permits a small number of people to impose their political will on others, and that potentially is of great use to any sort of a fascist entity or any person seeking totalitarian control, whether from the left or the right or a monarchist. After Julian Assange's latest downloading of State Department documents, of course, he has been charged with 2 counts of rape in Sweden. I want to note simply in passing that Sweden's rape laws are somewhat different from ours. The internet was then abuzz with an allegation that the women were actually being manipulated by the CIA and that they were part of CIA-controlled anti-Castro Cuban organizations. Aside from the analysis of the anti-Castro Cuban milieu, which is overtly fascist, what is interesting is the source for the allegation that basically was attempting to discredit Julian Assange's accusers by linking them with the CIA. That comes specifically from Alexander Coburn's Counterpunch newsletter, or its main citation is the Counterpunch newsletter of Alexander Coburn, and there's an article that he published on September 14th of 2010, Assange Besieged, by Israel Shamir and Paul Bennett. And again, that's from Counterpunch. And this is the source for the alleged CIA background and manipulation of Julian Assange's accusers. But what is so interesting is that Israel Shamir is not the real name for that fellow. He actually is a guy named Joran Jermas, was born in Russia, and now operates in conjunction with a Swedish Nazi and anti-Semitic milieu. From the British anti-fascist publication The Searchlight from May of 2004, Torbok, Sven Johansson, and Lisa Offerblom, Israeli writer is Swedish anti-Semite. A man who claims to be one of Israel's leading intellectuals is also a Swedish anti-Semitic writer. Israel Shamir presents himself on his website as a leading Russian-Israeli intellectual and a writer, translator, and journalist. But in 2001, he changed his name to Joran Jermas and has surrounded himself in Sweden and Norway with anti-Semites and strange conspiracy theorists. Among those, by the way, skipping down, Joran's translator in Norway is Hans Olaf Brenberg, a teacher who was recently asked to lead the executive committee of the RV Alliance. Brenberg stirred up controversy after writing articles for the left-wing Klassekampen in which he charged the Jews with killing Christ and hating all non-Jews. And this particular individual, again, Bronberg, the Norwegian translator for Shamir, is, again, a doctrinaire anti-Semitic conspiracy theorist. Basically, the world Jewish conspiracy theory is one of his major stocks in trade. More about the associates of Joran Jermas in Scandinavia. Shamir/Jermas has found other, even more extreme friends in Sweden. One of his Swedish translators, Lars Edelskog, is not only a leading figure in the Swedish UFO movement, but can also be found in the jungle of conspiracy theories where the Illuminati, the Freemasons, and the lizards in human form are supposedly working together to end civilization as we know it. Edelskog's last book bore the profound title, An Empty Bag Cannot Stand, and was published by the openly Nazi publisher Nordiska Forlaget. This organization also sells books by MacDonald, Hitler, and Irving. In his latest book, Edelskog tries in typical Nazi style to prove that the Nazi genocide of the Jews never took place, skipping down. Another outlet that eagerly promotes anti-Semitic conspiracy theories is the Russian magazine Zavtra and its editor Alexander Prokhonov. While in Moscow, Jermas worked as a journalist for Zavtra, which has been described as Russia's most anti-Semitic rag. When the notorious racist and former Ku Klux Klan leader David Duke went to Russia to promote his new book, Jewish Supremacism, and his National Association for the Advancement of White People, it was at Prokhonov's invitation. So these are the people who are the sources for the Joran Jermas, part of that milieu, is the source for the alleged CIA manipulation of the people who are charging Julian Assange with rape. But it's more than just the fact that they are the sources for it. It turns out that Joran Jermas, a.k.a. Israel Shamir, and his son are employees of WikiLeaks, and beyond that, they are in charge of WikiLeaks' dissemination of information in Scandinavia and Russia. A number of sites have talked about this. There's going to be a Guardian article that I'm going to talk about later, but from the Little Green Footballs website, WikiLeaks Russian representative, a Holocaust denier. One of the craziest weirdos Little Green Footballs has been following for years is a guy named Israel Shamir, a Russian-born, bark-at-the-moon anti-Semite and Holocaust denier who used to write for the Saudi English-language journal Arab News. And again, he is basically handling WikiLeaks operations for Russia. It's not just that Israel Shamir, a.k.a. Joran Jermas, is the source for trying to discredit Assange's critics or accusers. He's actually an employee, as is his son, who is of a similar political stripe. And this is from Reason Magazine. It's a libertarian publication. This is the more detailed account. There's also a similar account in The Guardian. This is from December 14th. The Swedish media has identified Shamir's son, a disgraced journalist named Johannes Wallström, himself accused of anti-Semitism and falsifying quotes, as a WikiLeaks spokesman in Sweden. Indeed, Wallström has authored stories based on the WikiLeaks material for the newspaper Aftonbladet and is credited as a producer on a recent Swedish public television documentary about the book. And as the article goes on to explain or illustrate, he's basically cut from the same political fabric as his father. So basically one is left with two choices here. Basically, at the epicenter of the pirate vortex, again, anarcho-utopian, not fascist by any means, is basically a Swedish Nazi financier, Carl Lundström. And we find its Swedish and Russian operations in many ways being handled by a couple of people who are part and parcel to the Swedish Nazi milieu. Now, either there is a relationship between those two situations or it's coincidental, and I doubt that it's coincidental. Returning once again to the goal, take over all piracy, note that the Nordic Publishers basically has published the material for Israel Shamir or Joran Jermas' Swedish publisher, the Nordiska Förlaget. And returning once again to the goal, take over all piracy, Lundström has made no secret of his sympathy for xenophobic groups, and last year his name was on the customer list of the Nazi publishing house Nordic Publishers, or Nordiska Förlaget. So it would appear, certainly, that Joran Jermas is from exactly the same Swedish Nazi/fascist milieu as Carl Lundström. This program exemplifies why people should use the SpitfireList.com website. Not only previous broadcasts, which contain information essential for understanding more recently produced programs, but also there's a vast amount of archived information, in particular the book Martin Bormann, Nazi in Exile, and related titles in the book section. In listening to this broadcast, without having read the Martin Bormann book, my guess is that an awful lot of this would appear ridiculous or at least incomprehensible. Please use the SpitfireList.com website. It's essential. It's essential for understanding these programs. And if you don't like what you're hearing, there's a page to click on to support the work that I'm doing, and there's no better way of fighting back if you don't like what's going on than supporting the work that I'm doing. This concludes Side 2 of For the Record program number 732, Dead Man's Chest, WikiFascism and the Attack of the Cyber-Wandervogel. This program is being recorded on January 9th of the year 2011. My name's Dave Emory. Thanks for listening.